Welcome to video 19 of Gamer to Game Developer Series 1, and in this video we implement the AirBlock. So we have a couple of objectives. We need to be able to place the AirBlocks, so we'll set up the system for that. We need to be able to remove them, we'll set up the system for that as well, and then we'll update the BlasterScript to recognize the AirBlock, and we'll make the AirBlock icon which will get displayed by the BuildOption script. So for our first objective, placing AirBlocks, it works exactly the same as the construction block. The only script that's significantly different is the player asks server to place script. The other scripts are pretty much the same. The change BuildOption script will be just updated a little bit to allow the player to have the option of an AirBlock and being able to place it. The AirBlockGuide too is a little bit different in how it positions blocks, so it'll just show the player where they can place an AirBlock, and of course it only runs if the selected build option is the AirBlock. Then when the player actually right clicks to place a block, then the player asks server to place AirBlock script will inform the ServerCreatesAirBlock script to create a block at the supplied position. So then a block will just simply get instantiated at that location across the network. So I'll just go over the scripts really quickly because they are really similar to the construction block, so you won't find me spending too much time going into detail. So the very first thing that we need to do is to create a texture for the AirBlock. Let's make our texture now. So File, New, set the width and height to 256. So 256 by 256 pixels. OK. I'll change the forecolor. So I'll set it to red, 255. Green, I'll set to 215, and I'll leave blue at 0. So OK, and I'll use the paint bucket tool and fill it in. Then I'll select all, select the border, so select border, I'll select a border of 8 pixels, and I'll now fill this border in with a darker shade. So I'll put the red to 200, I'll set the green to 175, and I'll leave blue at 0. Okay, and then just fill it in. And that's it for our texture. So now I'll save it. So File, Save As. In our folder, the usual one. So Assets, Textures, and I'll name it AirBlock. So AirBlock.png. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so let's just jump over to Unity and have a look at it. And there we go. That's our AirBlock texture. And it was originally a magenta color. I've just changed it to this yellow gold color. Truth is, you can just pick whatever color you want. Okay, so that's it. We'll move on to the next step where we'll set up the AirBlock. Our second step in Objective 1 is to set up the AirBlock. I'll create a new material. I'll call it AirBlock. I'll assign our new texture to it. I'll leave it diffuse as the shader. I'll now also create a new prefab, and this is going to be our AirBlock. So I'll call it AirBlock. And I can just use the construction block. So I'll just drag that in, and I've just copied it there, and it's now the AirBlock. And I'll get rid of this script because it's for the construction block, and I'll change the material to AirBlock. Okay, so that's our AirBlock setup, and the tag is also still construction block. So I'll add a new tag. So I'll call this tag AirBlock. And then just apply it to the prefab. Okay, so that's our AirBlock setup, and we can move to the next step. In step 3 of Objective 1, I'll just quickly go over what the ServerCreatesAirBlock script does It's just more of a reminder. It's almost identical to the construction block script. I'll open up our ServerCreatesAirBlock script and just briefly go over it. Okay, so this script is only running on the server. It's attached to the block manager, and its sole purpose is to instantiate AirBlocks across the network. So what it does, it's looking for a signal from the player asks server to place AirBlock script. So it's just looking for a signal from that it needs to drop a block, and it needs to know where the position that block needs to be and the rotation as well. So these three variables are set by that other script, the one that accesses the script, and this block counter here and block name bit is just used to give the block a unique name, that's all. So the block counter is increased each time the script places a block, and so that way every block has a unique name, which is important for removing it. Okay, so for this, it just only runs on the server as mentioned. When the drop signal is true, it'll generate a unique name for the AirBlock. It'll then instantiate across the network with the supplied position, rotation, and give the block a name. And then it just sets drop signal to false, so it doesn't keep dropping those blocks. And in that RPC itself, we can see that the RPC requires a position, rotation, and a string, the name. And it just, when the block is instantiated, we say block is equal to GameObject instantiate. By doing that, we can just access the instantiated object immediately. So we then just say block.name is equal to that supplied name. And we're also able to assign the block to that block air group, which we'll just set up in a moment. Right after discussing the script, I'll just set up the group AirBlock. And that is it. And the purpose of the group AirBlock is to stop the hierarchy window from getting totally crowded up with AirBlocks. Instead, they're all put into a single parent object, and that parent has the full list of child AirBlock objects. I think in the future though, when we come to combining meshes, so this wouldn't be in series 1, in series 2, when we come to combining meshes, then that probably will be advantageous to us, though I still have a lot more to study for that. Okay, so let's just jump over to Unity and just create this game object, the group AirBlock. So I'll just create a new game object. So I'll go to game object, create empty, and I guess I'll just reset its position, just reset it, and I'll name it group AirBlock. Group AirBlock. And of course the spelling is important. I could have copy pasted it from the script. Okay, so I've got it there, group AirBlock, and that should be it. It doesn't need any tag or anything like that. It's just simply a holder. Okay, so that does it for this step. We'll move on to the next step. In our fourth step, I'll just quickly go over the player asks server to place AirBlock script, and I'll attach some of the components in the game, like attach the script to the players and to the block manager as well. Now, before opening up the script, I'll define a new input, so edit project settings input, and I'll replace this jump here with mouse scroll wheel. So I'll explain that in a bit in the script itself. So mouse scroll wheel. I'll set the type to mouse movement, and I'll change the axis to third axis. So if you notice here, joysticks and scroll wheel. And I guess I'll just delete this positive button bit which says joystick button 3. So it should automatically, when we move the mouse wheel, this input should be recognized. Okay, so let's open up the script. So player asks server to place AirBlock script, and let's just quickly go over it. Now this script is actually, while we're at it, I'll open up the player asks server to place construction block script. Now our AirBlock script is actually a lot simpler than the construction block script. If you recall, the construction block version, it has a construction layer, foundation layer. So if you recall, the construction block can first be added, it can be added to the foundation layer. So the ground is the foundation layer, or any permanent structures that we decide to mark as foundation layer. And other blocks belong to the construction layer. So for example, the air blocks or other construction blocks. And so this script is, as you remember, split almost like in two parts. The first stage is a check if it's adding to the construction layer, then it'll add it through this bit of code. And then the second part is, if that wasn't the case, then that means it's getting added to the foundation layer. Now the AirBlock is a lot simpler. There's no layers in that, because all it is, it's just about placing the block anywhere within the virtual grid, anywhere that isn't already occupied by something else, another block. So because of that, we don't need to worry about layers at all, and instead we use range. So the player can use their scroll wheel to change the range at which the block can be placed. So a block can be placed really close, or they can move the scroll wheel away from them and increase the distance where they want to place it. So very briefly, I'll just go over it. So the script is attached to the players and allows them to place air blocks, and it determines where the position of the air block should be. So it determines the position, and it gives the server that information in the ServerCreatesAirBlock script. It supplies that script with a signal that yes, an air block is to be placed, the position it's to be placed at, and the rotation as well. Okay. Now this script, it accesses the ServerCreatesAirBlock script, to supply that information. It'll also access the player resource script to deduct resource, and it'll access the change build option script to check that it is the selected build option. So of course we'll need to update this script, the change build option, which is just in a step up ahead. Okay, so our variables, it's simpler than the construction block version. As you can see, it's much simpler. All it is, this bit is just for the virtual grid itself and placement, the range placement, then some cached items, and yes, the temp block itself, which also gets dropped. Okay, then in the start function, just setting up those references, then moving to the update function, and here's where it gets more interesting, in that we can place the block when we right click, which is that same place block button. And what happens is that we capture a position that's relative to the camera head transform at a position directly in front based on the range. Then we just carry out that calculation process for positioning the block in the grid. And that's what you can see here. That's what's happening. And what you could do, like what I've done here, is just have some commented out debug log statements. So that's where you can understand why I'm saying if my camera head transform.EulerAngles.x is greater than or equal to 90, then bump up the position by 0.5. Now the reason why I'm doing that is so that the block can be placed near to the crosshair. It doesn't, when you start, if I didn't do this, and when you start looking up at a steeper angle, the block will move further, the placement of it will be further and further from the crosshair that the player will be looking at, which will of course make it somewhat more difficult to place a block. So by doing this check, it stays quite close to the crosshair. And you'll see the angles when you uncomment the debug.log. You'll be able to see what the angle the player is facing when they look up and down. How it is the horizon is 0 degrees and seemingly 360 degrees, and when you start looking up, it goes down to 270 degrees. So you go from 360 to 270. 270 is looking vertically up, and when you start looking down, you start from 0, and when you look straight down, it's 90. So that's all. That's why this bit just needs to factor in which way the player is facing, up or down. And then of course some further calculation bits, and then that's it. The block is now positioned correctly in the grid. So it's only a few lines. And the way to understand it is to use a debug.log line of code. Okay, then after that, there's just a simple check to see that there's nothing already there. So a line cast is sent, and if nothing is sitting in that space already, then the resource, and of course the resource needs to be sufficient, then in that case, an RPC is sent to the server that it should place that block, and here's that RPC, giving it the signal and the position and the rotation. So very simple. And then a temp block is dropped, which, as you remember, is so that because of the delay between server and player, the temp block then makes construction look instantaneous. And of course, the resource is then deducted. Now this is the bit which is controlled for the mouse wheel. I mean, this is the bit of code for the mouse wheel. So if we have, if first of all, this build state needs to be AirBlock, so that way when the player, if they just move the mouse wheel, it doesn't change. So that way, if the player changes build option to something else and they come back to this, the range they had set it at will stay the same. Okay, and all it's saying here is that if the player moves the mouse wheel away from them, so greater than 0, then the range is increased. And if they decrease the mouse wheel, they set it to, if they start rolling it towards themselves, then the range is decreased by that amount, by the amount grid width each time that the mouse wheel is rotated. And then of course you have here, if it's less than the grid width times 2, then the minimum range is grid width times 2, which is 1.2 meters. And if it's greater than the max range, it's just set back to the max range. Okay, so that was nothing really complicated. So I'll just jump back to Unity and just attach these scripts, might as well. So let's go over to our players. I might start with the block manager first, since that'll be the one I'm more likely to forget. So I'll attach the ServerCreatesAirBlock script to this block manager. So ServerCreatesAirBlock script, okay. And what it wants here is the AirBlock prefab itself. So I might as well attach that as well. So let's go up, the AirBlock prefab, and just drop it in. Okay, and it just mimics the previous one anyway, so you can just compare there to see if it looks alright, and it does. Okay, so then the next one is to just attach the player AsksServerLoPlace block, etc. scripts to the players. So I'll do that right now. So player AsksServerLoPlace script attach, and it'll need a temp block, so we'll have to set that up and then we'll attach it. So let's do the same thing for the red player. And I'll attach the same script. Okay, so the scripts are attached, and we'll continue to the next step where we'll set up the temp block. Alright, now we'll quickly set up the air temp block. Okay, I'll create a new prefab. So prefabs, create prefab, and I'll name it Temp AirBlock. And I'll drag our AirBlock into it. I'll just minimize those so they take a bit less space. I'll drag the AirBlock into it. And I'll need to attach a script, which is the temp block removal script, which you can recall from the construction block. So we're just going to recycle that same script. So just drop it in. And I'll just open it up briefly just to show you what it was. Just to remind you, all it is that depending on the latency, the time that this block will survive is dependent on that. After that time, the block just destroys itself. Simple as that. Okay, so back to Unity. So now I'll just attach that new prefab. So let me just go back, have a look at it. Temp AirBlock, yes, it's all okay. That's good, good, good. Now I'll just attach it to the player, to that slot that we had. Remember the temp block? So I'll just drop it in. Do the same thing for the red player. Just drop that temp block in. Okay, so that's it for this step. We'll move to the next step. Okay, we're on to step 6 of objective 1, where I'll update the change build option script. I'll open up our change build option script and I'll start editing it. So over in the summary, I'll add 2 new summary comments. So the first, the player asks server to place AirBlock script, accesses this script, and the AirBlockGuide script, which we haven't talked about yet, but it's really simple. The AirBlockGuide script accesses this script. Okay. Then in our enum, we have AirBlock already, so that's good. Then we'll add a new texture slot. So over here, we'll have public texture AirBlock texture, or text for short. Then we'll add a new build state to our build list. So here where we have build list.add, we'll add a new one, which is build list, not left, list.add state dot AirBlock. Okay, so now our list has 3 items in it. Next, we'll go over to where it's actually displayed. So in the void selected build option window script function, I'll now add a portion for actually displaying the AirBlock, because now it's in the list and it'll get cycled through in the update function. Okay, so actually let's just copy paste this. So just copy paste. And I'll just say if build option is equal to change build option state AirBlock, then the texture that'll get shown is simply AirBlock text. And same, yep, that's the width of the icon, height, and that's all good. Alright, and the rest doesn't change. So that's it. We've updated our build option script, the change build option script, and we can move on to the next step. We're on to our 7th step, which will be super quick, setting up the AirBlock guide. Okay, for our AirBlock guide, all I will do is to simply duplicate the construction block guide. So really simple, so just duplicate, Control D, and I will rename it AirBlock guide. So I'll just get rid of that, AirBlock guide. Okay, and let's see, I should then just drop it into the hierarchy panel so that our script, the AirBlock guide script, will be able to find it. Okay, so we'll move on to the next step. Our last step in Objective 1 is to quickly discuss the AirBlock guide script and attach it to the players. So let's quickly have a look at the AirBlock guide script. And it's just identical almost to the player AsksServerloPlace AirBlock script, in that it uses all the same sort of code to figure out where a block would be able to be placed. So we have here the same variables for the virtual grid stuff, the range for the scroll wheel, and then your cached items as well. Then of course it sets up those references in the start function, and then in the update function we have the calculations to figure out where that position will be. So all of this code here is to figure out where a block can be placed in the virtual grid, and this position is going to be used by the Air guide block, so the guide block, so that the player can then have a visual representation of where that block can be placed. And of course we just do that quick line cast check to just see that there's no block already sitting in that space, and if there isn't, then what will happen is that the Air guide block will be given the position that we've calculated, and its rotation will just stay the same. It will be just quaternion.identity, and its renderer will be enabled so that it is now visible to the player. And if that isn't true, then of course if something was there, then the renderer is false and it's not visible, or if this business of where the build option is no longer the AirBlock or the cursor has been unlocked, then in that case, once again, the renderer will be disabled, so it becomes invisible. And then we have a little bit of code here, which is still in the update function, about, well, it's for the scroll wheel, so that the player can set the range at which they want to place the AirBlock. So very, very simple code. And I'll just go ahead back to Unity and attach the script to both players. So just scroll down and just drop it in AirBlockGuide. And also for the red player, they need the AirBlockGuide as well. And that is it. Okay, so we can move on to the next objective now. We're on to our second objective, which is about removing AirBlocks. So very simply, we have the BlockEraser weapon that you remember. Now this script, of course, needs to get updated so that it can recognize the AirBlock and be able to inform the AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script that it has been hit. And once it does that, once the script knows that it has been hit, it'll then inform the ServerRemovesAirBlock script to remove it from the game. So this script is only running on the server, and the BlockEraser would send an RPC to the server, to the script on the server, to tell it that was hit, and on the server it'll tell that ServerRemovesAirBlock script that it needs to get removed, and it's this one that'll then delete it across the network. Okay, so our very first step will be to just quickly go over the ServerRemovesAirBlock script. So let's open up the ServerRemovesAirBlock script and quickly discuss that. So this script is only running on the server because it's only ever going to receive a positive signal on the server from that player, well, from the AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script. And we use that list, remember, just like the construction block. This script is actually identical to that, just different names, and it uses that list just in case there are multiple AirBlocks being destroyed at the same time, say by a rocket. And in that case, all it does is when the destroy signal is true, and what it'll just do is just go through each block in that list and then just destroy it across the network. And how it does that is by using the supplied name. Okay, so that's it. Now let's go ahead, go back to Unity and attach the script to the block manager itself. So I'll just jump over to the block manager and just attach this ServerRemovesAirBlock script. Okay, and that is it. And we'll move on to the next step. The second step in Objective 2 is to just quickly go over the AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script. I'll open up the AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script now. So AirBlockAssToRemoveitself. And the script is really simple. It's just like the construction block version. And it's attached to the AirBlock itself. And all it does is that when an RPC is sent to this script from the player's game, when they destroy a block, their BlockEraser script or Rocket script will send an RPC to the server, to this script on the server for this AirBlock, telling it that it is hit. So this script is also, it basically only runs on the server, and that's why we have here if network.isServer, then IamHit is true. Well, if it is true, then just carry out this function, which is about deleting the AirBlock, and that is simply accessing that ServerRemovesAirBlock script and supplying the name of the block and giving it a destroy signal. Well, it supplies that name by adding it to that list of blocks to destroy. So very, very simple. Let's go ahead and attach it to the players. So for our blue player, I will attach, oh sorry, not to the players, to the block itself. So to the AirBlock, I'll just simply attach it right here. And that is it, and we can move to the next step. Our last step in Objective 2 is to update the BlockEraser script so that it recognizes air blocks. Let's open up our BlockEraser script and give it an update. So jumping over to it, I can now write in the comments here that this script, actually why don't I just copy paste this and just change the name. Okay, this script accesses, instead of the construction block, it's now AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script. And this is done by sending an RPC to the server. I don't know why I wrote scripts there, it should just be script. And I guess I don't need that either. Okay. Now I'll jump over all the way to the bottom and actually just set up a new RPC. So it's just like this one, except it's for the AirBlock. So I could, yeah, why not? Let's just copy this RPC. And instead I'll call it tell server AirBlock is hit. AirBlock is hit, and yes, the RPC will require a string, the name of the block to delete. So GameObjectBlock is equal to GameObject.find, yes, that block name, the supplied one. Then this bit here we'll need to change to AirBlockAssToRemoveitself script is equal to block.transform.getComponent, change it to AirBlockAssToRemoveitself. So that's the type. Okay, and then script.IamHit is equal to true. Let me just check that that is the case. IamHit, yes, it's correct. Okay, so that's that RPC added. Now let's go back up to the update function. And in the bit where we're recognizing what sort of a tag has been struck by the raycast for the BlockEraser, we'll have here now if this hit.transform.tag is a construction block, or hit.transform.tag is, well, AirBlock. Then we would execute the same bit of code. Yes, setting up that, showing that line, you know, the magenta colored line that we see. And then of course in that case, if the line is visible, then if the player presses their left click, then this RPC would get sent off. Now we're going to add, so you see here this bit where if the tag is for the construction block, then it would send an RPC according to this RPC here, which is to the construction block AsksToRemoveitself script. So we can just copy paste that and just put it down below. And now instead of air construction block, it's now AirBlock. So AirBlock, to inform them, the block on the server, that it has been hit. Yes, that's right. And I'll just copy this name here off the RPC, paste it in, and that should be it. I'll just save the script. And yes, we have everything. We've allowed it to recognize the AirBlock now. We've given the new RPC what to do when this block is hit by the BlockEraser raycast. And of course we've added the bit where the RPC is made use of and sent to this server only. Okay, so that is it for this step. We'll move on to the next objective. We're on to objective 3, which is really quick, which is to update the BlasterScript so that it recognizes the AirBlock. I'll open up the BlasterScript, and it's a really simple change that we need to make to it. So down in the bit where it recognizes, yep, the blue team trigger, red team trigger, and of course the construction block itself, we'll now add another thing, which is the AirBlock. So, or hit.transform.tag is AirBlock. Okay, and that is it. We'll just save that. So all it is if the blaster projectile is hitting an AirBlock, then it just does all this stuff where it just expends itself and disables its renderer and light. So the blaster is effectively destroyed when it hits an AirBlock now. Okay, so that is it. Now we can move on to the final objective. We're on to our final objective, which is to make the AirBlock icon, and then we can just set everything up, whatever's left, and build and run the game. I'll open up our studio, that's the one we used last time. I will disable the construction block, yes, deactivate children, so it just disappears. I'll now drag in the AirBlock since we're going to make an icon for it. Okay, and it actually looks all okay. Yeah, okay, so that means we should be able to just build and run this. So go to File, Build, Settings, and as before, just make sure that the studio is now the one that's enabled. Go ahead, build and run, and yeah, just save over the previous. Okay, I'll set it to fantastic and just hit play. And I'll just simply take a screenshot with my print screen button. Okay, that is it. I can shut it down. I'll shut this down too, and go to GIMP. Okay, I'll create a new texture. I'll use the 1600 by 1200 for me. For you, it might be something different. I'll paste in my screenshot. And once again, like before, I'll change the background color. I'll use this color picker tool and select the very edge of the cube, get that color. Okay, and I'll now undo the screenshot paste in. So Control Z, I'll swap it. I will use the bucket tool to fill it in. I'll swap it back to background color. I'll go to Layer, Transparency, add Alpha Channel. I'll go to Edit, Clear to remove it, so now it's transparent. I will paste the picture back in. I'll then use the crop tool and set it to 512 by 512. Okay, and just position it so the cube has a bit of bias towards the top left, not too much, I guess. Okay, and just hit enter. Okay, now we're going to use the paths tool. So let me just zoom in here. So let's select the paths tool, and like before for the construction block, just select close to the edge, but not too much into the fuzzy region. Oops, that didn't come out quite right. Okay, that's better. No. Nope, that's too high. So set it a bit lower. Yeah, that's better. And finally, connect back up to the first node. Okay. So that's it. I'll hit enter. I guess I'll hit Control H. And I'll just select none, Control Shift A. Okay. So that is it. We've made our icon. So let's save it. So File, Save As, Assets, Textures, and I'll call this AirBlock icon .png. Yep, that's all good. Okay, so I'll just close this down. We shouldn't need it anymore. And we can jump back to Unity. We can go back to the Series 1 prototype scene. So yes, we can save that. So save. And back here, going back to both players, scroll down to that script, the change build option script, and pick our new icon, which you can see down here. It's there, which is good and looks really sharp, which is also really good. I'll set it to advanced, and I'll just turn off generate MIP maps and apply. Now I'll go back to the players. So this time I guess I'll just go right here. Okay, down to the change build option bit, and I'll attach that icon, and also for the blue player as well. Okay, so that should be everything. We should be able to build and run. Well, let's just give it a try. So file, build settings, turn off the studio, turn on our prototype, and hit build and run. Yes, so if there's any error, we'll then see it and probably be able to pick up quickly what it might be. I'll just set it back to good, hit play. Which one should I use as the server? Maybe I'll just set up the server here. I'll try with both. I'll connect as a red team player. Okay, let's hit the 4 key, okay. And yes, we can use our mouse scroll wheel. So I'll just expand that a bit. So return to game. Okay, so as you can see, I'm able to use the AirBlock. Let's right click, and yes, I'm able to place it. And it is deducting resource correctly, which is good news. Let me change to the other block. Let me try to place an AirBlock inside. So let's bring that. Yep, it won't let me. It just won't let me, which is very good. So I can place it wherever, but I can't place it inside an existing block, which is very good. Let me use the BlockEraser. Yes, it looks like, yes, it is recognized, so very good. That means we shouldn't have any problems, and there have been no errors whatsoever. Okay, what else should I check? I guess I should check that it works for the other player. So connect. I'll join as a blue team player this time. Okay, yes, I can use our AirBlock. And that's good. That's very good. Okay, and can I destroy it? Yes, I can destroy it. There are no errors. It should work exactly the same. I can't place an AirBlock inside something else. Now let's go ahead and change this to the server. Come back to here, shut this server down. Let's set this one up as the server and play from here and see if there are any errors appearing down here. So I'll connect as a red team player. Okay, I'll hit the 4 button. Yes, we have our construction block, which we know. Now let's have a look. Yes, we have our AirBlock. The mouse scroll wheel works perfectly. I can place the block up into the sky, which is really good. So no problems. I'll bring it back closer to me and place it again. Of course, see, if I look too down, of course it won't let me place it in the floor, so it's smart in that way, which is good. Now that's very good. I can, of course, destroy it, and meanwhile, while I'm doing all that, as we can see, I should just move it about there so we can see the action. As we can see, no errors are being thrown up at all, which is really good. How about I jump up into the sky, go backwards, okay, and I can basically use it to break my fall. Somehow. Alright, so that is very good. And it looks like our system is working. And yep, I can of course delete it. Yep. Now I'd say probably my choice of color is really not that good, I'd say. Nah, I'm not too happy with the goldy yellow color. So yeah, please feel free to change that to whatever texture color you want. I prefer my old magenta color, which I had in the prototype that you can download off my website. So that one, well, that one has a magenta colored block. Anyhow, let me just quickly check that it's all okay if I use a blue player as well. So this is the sort of thing I usually do behind the scenes, not while you're watching. But I'm just making sure, so this also gives you an idea of, I guess, the sort of thing that you sort of have to randomly do to make sure that it's all working okay. And it does appear to be so. There haven't been any errors. Everything's behaving as expected, which is really good. So that's it, really. we've probably reached the end of this video. Yes, we have actually. And this video we implemented this AirBlock, which allows us, it's pretty neat. I like it more than the construction block. There's a lot more freedom with it. You can place it anywhere. You can build construction with it. Oh, and by the way, the construction block, because it's part of the construction layer, you can add construction blocks to the AirBlock. So the AirBlock also gives you a way to construct things in the sky without having to, I guess, build a bridge going all the way up there. So as you can see, it's getting independently built. I can just independently build. Okay, so it's a kind of a fun component. It's not necessary or anything, but it's interesting. Alright, so in our next video, we'll do something interesting as well, and quite expected for, I guess, a first-person shooter game like this, which is to have pickups in the game. So in our next video, we'll implement the recharge pickups. So simple pickups that we can just walk into to recharge health, energy, or resource. And they're network enabled. So when new players join into the game, if the resource pickup was taken, then it'll appear taken to that newly joined player. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.